Alright everyone, this is actually a little bit of a spin-off of a video that I did the other day. I think it was one of the Alt-Tech exclusives, so you can go look it up. And that's the idea that if you're pro-mass immigration, you're basically stuck in the 19th century, in the sense of the United States. Although I would argue many parts of the world at this point are at critical mass population-wise. It's my belief that pheromonal interactions, especially in urban communities, are reducing people's overall reproductive rate. And that basically you've got rat paradise going on in certain parts of the world, which explains why very densely populated nations often their populations are dropping, because they went past their actual, what I call comfort capacity. Now, you can cram more people in, but it's not comfy anymore. People want a little bit of room to roam. It's like here in the Netherlands, it's basically one big city. What they call rural, there's a small bit of forest, managed forest for lumber mainly, in the south central of the country. Much of the rest of it is hyper-developed, and even like the farmland, there are like these little tiny green spaces between farms, little forests that are managed by all the villages and stuff out there where you can take a walk. Pines had this when we were there, but it's not technically truly rural. You're never really, I mean, if you go up to a third floor in a building, you'll see a city in the distance, very easily, partially because it's so flat. But anyway, you've got to understand that when people like on the left, they say, well, look at the Statue of Liberty, give me your tired and your poor, it's good to take in immigrants, they enrich our culture and stuff. That was true 100 years ago. That was true in the era of like the Homestead Act and things like that. 1874, I believe it was, something like that. Homestead Act. The idea was that we were trying to attract immigrants because we had this enormous swath of the country that was completely empty. So we said anyone from Europe, and it was specifically at first just Europeans, after a while certain East Asian groups, but by and large Europeans, especially North and West Europe, the British Empire, the French, Swedes especially in parts of the country, Norwegians, could come and settle. As long as they could get to their land, we'd give them basically free land. They got their parcel. Americans were able to homestead as well. There was the westward migration. People moved to what was then the West, and they settled between the coasts. Basically, the United States at the time was some cities on the coast and in the south, and a little bit of development like as far west as the Appalachian region or a little further. Everything else basically that wasn't on the lake shores of the Great Lakes was sparsely populated. Some of it wasn't even states yet, it was still territories. We said, look, we're building all these railroads, Transcontinental Railroad and all of these things, but in order to justify that, you're going to need something in between the two coasts. It doesn't make sense to have a rail line that's, a fucking 1,000 miles long, and back then it took a while to traverse that by rail. Yeah, what, a 5-6 day journey, and there's no stops along the way. Well, now we'll put in these little stops, we'll have these little railroad towns, and we'll grant land to people. They partner directly with the rail companies to do this. You build this, we're giving you kickbacks in return, you parcel up this land and give it out to all the immigrants. The problem is that that was in the 1800s. Fast forward to today. Is there a sparsely populated part of the country in which the sparseness justifies pumping it full of people? No. We've already, virtually all available arable land is already being farmed or set aside as fallow. Conservation, of course, we got state parks, national parks and stuff, military bases. There isn't a whole lot of empty land left. Basically, all you can do now is subdivide the land plots that are already there. Now, if you want development in some small town somewhere where the average parcel's 10 acres anyway, yeah, you can build a little village there. But it doesn't really serve any efficient economic purpose. There's really no reason to do that. If the land is arable, ostensibly it should be farmed. You're doing rotating cuts of lumber. They do this in Vermont a lot. Lumber industry, you cut one part off, then the next part, and you rotate it year by year in your holdings. The land tends to be cheap because it's very rural, and you log it in stages. Farms and forests and stuff. Converting that land to the suburbs does not make it more efficient for any purpose other than, hey, there's more tax money coming in. In other words, mass immigration was great. If you wanted to build skyscrapers, the cities, up until basically the end of the 1800s, most of the buildings in the cities are just densely crammed together, but you couldn't build like skyscrapers or anything. We started building the buildings taller and taller, We learned about reinforced steel beams, and then they got even taller and started building up. At the same time, we had 90% of the country's land area was empty, so we had to fill it in, farms and towns and stuff. We don't have that anymore. If people are still doing the give me your tired, you're poor thing, the problem is that the situation is a complete inversion of what it was in the late 1800s. Now we have a lack of space in certain areas, hyperdevelopment, urban sprawl. We have all of these problems. If anything, we should be aiming for zero population growth in most of the world. There's really no reason to aim for growing in the numeric sense when you can always grow, instead of in the quantitative sense, grow in the qualitative sense. Through technology, making the things you've already developed more efficient, easier to maintain, and in the case that there's growth at all, building upwards in areas that are already urban is much more, because if you take the farm, let's say you have a 50-acre farm and you cut it in half so that 2 people can farm it. You've lowered the efficiency, arguably. What used to be done by 1 person is now just subdivided to 2 people. You've reduced the efficiency, if anything else. If you do it in an urban area where you've got a 3-story building and you make it 6 stories tall, you haven't really reduced the efficiency of anything. Those people aren't going to be farming. They're not going to be lumberjacks or something using the land. They're in clerical work or something. They're processing. They work in a factory. That's efficient. I would say we should start building energy generating structures on top of our cities more, but if there is growth, you can do that. Why would you then want hundreds of thousands or millions of newcomers in the country every year when you already have population growth that isn't adding to efficiency? On paper, you've got more production, but that's just because you've got more people buying things. It's not increasing the output in most senses of what's already there, of the farm, of the forest stand, of the factory, the mine or something. You're stuck in the 19th century. You believe it's like 1890 or something. Or the era of Theodore Roosevelt and the Great White Navy. That's not the way the world works anymore. There's literally no particular reason whatsoever for us to grow at all. That's about all. Peace out.